political and social systems. We have more than 180, it's almost the whole composition of the UN countries which signed it, and more than 160 that ratified. But 30 years after, almost 30 years after its adoption, the treaty is not in force. And I think that creates problems, because this long period of time in itself, when the treaty cannot enter into force, is beginning to somehow undermine the authority, because it's an indication of problems. The issue, of course, the comprehensive test ban itself has known during its long history the periods of success and the periods of relative failure. Negotiations were started and then ended without results. There were periods when the key countries even did not want to negotiate. And during those periods, the work did not stop, and various groups of competent experts, for example, were working on a monitoring system, on verification system for the future CTBT, and by the way, even in the absence of a political consensus to have the treaty. I think that today we have arrived at the need to take strategic decisions as to how to proceed. Out of 5 permanent members of the Security Council, 3 have ratified, 2 have not, United States and China. We also have several key countries considered to be important for the treaty, for its success. Some of them signed the convention, the treaty, and some which have not even signed and not ratified. There can be several ways. One is to continue the way we are continuing. Another is to find some other ways. And this, I hope, would be a subject of our discussion today. I have to say that we planned to have an address or presentation by the head of Provisional Technical Secretariat of the Preparatory Commission for the CTBTO in Vienna, Mr. Zerbo, but due to unforeseen circumstances which emerged at the late moment, he was not in a position to come here. And he asked, but he prepared his message, and he asked my neighbor to the right and good friend, Reza Ziaran, who is also working in the CTBTO and is a member of the Pugwash Council at the same time, to present this message on his behalf. After which we would have a discussion, and the 2 other members of the panel for that discussion are, well, they are seated a bit on the other side of the rostrum. They are both members of the team of eminent persons. This team was put together by the Preparatory Commission for the CTBTO, as one of important vehicles to help achieve the situation in which the entry into force could be expedited. And they are, well, first is Sergio Duarte, Ambassador Sergio Duarte, who is in fact a very eminent person, not just for the CTBTO business, but for disarmament as well. Ex-Under-Secretary General in charge of disarmament, and also a member of the Pugwash Council. And the one sitting on the extreme right, of course, is known to all of you as well, and this is Ambassador Jayantha Dhanapala, President of the Pugwash, and also former Under-Secretary General for this armament. I think it would be a long list if I start listing all his or Sergio Duarte's earlier duties. So it is a very strong team of people, and the first to speak is Reza Ziaran, who would speak, in fact, on behalf of Mr. Zerbo. Thank you.
Thank you. Reaching that objective demands political determination and leadership on the part of the 8 remaining Annex II states and active support of the civil society. We have a number of initiatives to engage these Annex II states. The treaty provides for a series of Article 14 conferences to advance its entry into force. The 9th such conference took place in New York in September 2015. Japan and Kazakhstan are coordinators of the process for the next 2 years. During this period, they will employ a targeted approach to reach out to key decision makers in the Annex II states. I'm grateful for the commitment of Japan and Kazakhstan to the cause of the treaty and its entry into force. In this respect, I should refer to the joint statement adopted by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and President Nazarbayev on 27 October 2015. In 2013, I established a group of eminent persons called GEM, made up of serving and former senior leaders, diplomats, and opinion setters in disarmament and non-proliferation. The GEM has had significant success in ensuring that the CTBT is raised in a variety of high-level settings. 2 members of Pugwash, Ambassador Dhanapala and Ambassador Duarte, also serve as members of the GEM. The 20th anniversary of the treaty next year presents a unique opportunity to take stock of our achievements, including the installation and operation of the verification regime of the treaty, and to reflect on how to advance its entry into force and universalization. Preparations for the 20th anniversary is underway and events are being planned. Among these events will be a ministerial level meeting in Vienna in June 2016. To start our 20th anniversary commemorations, a seminar-style symposium entitled Diplomacy and Science for Peace and Security will be held in Vienna from 25 January to 5 February 2016. The symposium will focus on the key strengths of the treaty, namely the nexus between science and diplomacy. With the 20th anniversary of the treaty in mind, and in the spirit of Russell Einstein manifesto, I hope that Pugwash conference will support entry into force of the treaty, thereby putting an end to all nuclear explosive testings for all time. I look forward to exploring additional areas of cooperation between the CTBT and Pugwash, not only in our preparations for 2016, but also in the further development of the CTBT verification regime, as well as our mutual goal of achieving a world free of the threats of nuclear weapons. End of quotation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei. Since 1945, public opinion worldwide has been concerned with the harmful consequences of nuclear weapon tests in the atmosphere and prompted calls for their prohibition. Over several decades, more than 2,000 such tests were carried out. The Partial Test Ban Treaty, the PTBT, negotiated between the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom and signed in 1963, was the starting point for the subsequent efforts to extend the prohibition to all environments. The escalation of the nuclear arms race in the second half of the 20th century, together with the risk of further proliferation of nuclear weapons, helped provide impetus for the negotiation of agreements aimed at curbing all nuclear weapon tests explosions as a step towards achieving the goal of nuclear disarmament. The process of negotiation of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty was finally achieved in the mid-1990s, thus realizing a long-standing priority objective of the international community. On September 10, 1996, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the CTBT by a large majority and asked the Secretary General to open it for signature. During that month, or soon after, many states signed it at the United Nations headquarters. To date, the CTBT has 183 signatories, among which 164 have ratified it. About 300 locations in 90 countries around the world house installations belonging to the International Monitoring System, designed to detect underground nuclear explosions of a yield of at least 1 kiloton. Many states continue to support the establishment of the IMS, which must be ready to meet the requirements of the treaty at entry into force. Placing limitations on the ability of states to manufacture, develop, and modernize nuclear weapons is a key element of the international regime of non-proliferation. However, despite its importance to prevent the development of atomic explosives and the acquisition of nuclear weapons by states not possessing such armament, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty is not yet formally in effect. Even while not formally in force, the CTBT set up a standard that amounts to a strong condemnation of any country that conducts such tests. With the exception of the DPRK, a voluntary moratorium on test explosions has been observed since the mid-1990s by all states possessing nuclear weapons, and for that matter, by all other members of the international community. The carrying out of a test explosion by any state would mean the end of that situation and would be seen as a serious challenge to international peace and security. But this is not enough. Unilateral acts cannot be a substitute for a legal commitment under positive international law. The overwhelming majority of the international community strongly supports the CTBT and has not relented in its efforts to promote its objectives and to convince holdouts to join in the efforts to make the treaty truly universal in scope. Civil society has played an important part in such efforts. As we have just heard, a number of initiatives has been taken to advance the entry into force of the CTBT. I am honored to have been invited to belong to the group that was established in 2013 by Dr. Lassina Zerbo to promote this objective by means of strong advocacy action and in high-level settings, and in the mainstream media in several countries, including those whose ratification is still necessary for the entry into force of the CTBT. It is imperative that the international community redoubles its efforts to convince the remaining states to take the necessary steps according to their internal legal organization to sign the CTBT or to complete the ratification process. The continued existence of nuclear weapons is a threat to international peace and security. The CTBT is a valuable tool both to prevent their further spread and to curb the qualitative arms race. It must become a universal legal norm for the benefit of the international community as a whole. In the past, Pugwash played an invaluable role in promoting negotiations on the CTBT and in facilitating their successful conclusion. Today, strong expression of support by Pugwash is an important element to achieve the long overdue entry into force of this treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to add my support to the plea for the urgent entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The appointment of the new Executive Secretary, Dr. Lassina Zerbo, and the initiative that he has created through the appointment of a group of eminent persons are part of the re-energization of efforts towards the achievement of the entry into force of the CTBT, which is a very vital element not only of the implementation of the NPT, but a step towards the abolition of nuclear weapons and the nuclear weapon-free world, which was envisioned by President Obama. There is increasing talk about the re-energization of the process of entry into force, and Secretary of State John Kerry has been the most recent person making this statement. The group of eminent persons is widely representative of the international community and consists of several persons of great experience in the field of disarmament. We have Hans Blix, we have the former Secretary of Defense, Lord Brown of UK, and we have many others who have been extremely vocal in their support of the CTBT. Several meetings have been held in various parts of the world, concluding with declarations which have reiterated the importance of the CTBT in the achievement of a nuclear weapon-free world. The last of these meetings was held in Hiroshima in August of this year, and both Sergio and I were present there, and the Hiroshima Declaration is available on the CTBTO website. I'd like to recall the historical context of the CTBT because having presided over the 1995 NPT Review and Extension Conference, I know how important the decision of the United States administration, the Clinton administration, to go ahead with the negotiation of the CTBT helped towards the successful conclusion of that 1995 conference and the indefinite extension of the NPT. Prior to that, NPT review conferences had been seriously impacted by the failure on the part of the nuclear weapon states to agree on a CTBT, and several conferences had failed to achieve a final consensus document precisely because of that dispute. And 1990 was the most recent before the 1995 conference. But there was a transformation of the approach to the 1995 conference as a result of the Clinton administration deciding with great foresight to announce the beginning of negotiations in the CD on a CTBT. And it is well known that the United States had to drag some of its allies kicking and screaming to the conference table in order to start negotiations. And that was a major achievement on the part of the Clinton administration. Having successfully extended the NPT indefinitely, the CD very successfully concluded the negotiations by 1996. And despite obstacles towards the adoption of the treaty text in the CD, there was an effort through the Australians to have the treaty introduced in the UNGA, and it was adopted in the UNGA. As the treaty was opened for signature, the first signature was that of President Clinton on behalf of the United States. But while applauding the Clinton administration for initiating the negotiations on the CTBT and being the first to sign the treaty, I have to fault it for not staying the course and ensuring that the treaty was also ratified by them. Because I was ambassador in Washington at the time, and I'm aware that even liberal Republican senators like Senator Lugar were not even approached by the State Department to be given the case for ratification. As a consequence, the effort was defeated in the Senate, and it will be a long time before it reappears because of the current complexion of the US Senate and the impossibility of achieving politically the ratification, because the US Senate constitutionally has to advise and consent to any US treaty. I think it's important for us also to now face the reality that in 2016, with the 20th anniversary of the CTBT and the election of a next president and a next Senate also going to take place in the fall of 2016, it is very difficult to expect the 8 countries who remain in the waiting line or outliers of the treaty to ratify the treaty and help it to enter into force. Many alternatives to the entry into force through the legal process of ratification of the 44 states named in Annex 2 has been proposed. A provisional entry into force has been the most common proposal, but people have hesitated to take that step because of the fact that it has not been done before and because it might cause problems even within those countries who have signed and ratified the 164 that were mentioned. But I have recently been very interested in a proposal made by Professor David Coppolo of Georgetown University in the Georgetown Law Journal, where he has suggested that one way in which the legal norm of making nuclear weapon testing taboo would be to have a UN Security Council resolution adopted. And it seems a very amazingly simple solution to the problem. It is not a substitute for ratification, but it certainly reinforces the legal norm which says that nuclear weapon testing is a breach of the peace. Now, we all know that under the Charter, the Security Council has authority on international peace and security. And if a Security Council resolution is adopted under Chapter 7 of the Charter, reinforcing the legal norm, I think there would be considerable weight to the moratorium that now exists, and less of a possibility of that moratorium, which is very fragile, being violated. So there are some people in New York and elsewhere who are talking about having a non-permanent member of the Security Council propose this resolution in the Security Council with the confidence that none of the P5, even the 2 who have not ratified the treaty, are likely to veto this, because they themselves have signed the treaty and they have no cause to object to the norm being honored in the Security Council resolution, nor would the other 10 non-permanent members. So this is an interesting proposal which has been mentioned, Japan and Kazakhstan, as we know, are the new co-chairs under the Article 14 conference, and they have announced in their September meeting their desire to conduct an aggressive campaign for the ratification and entry into force of the CTBT. Whether this will take place under their watch is left to be seen, but certainly Japan becomes a non-permanent member of the Security Council next year, and Kazakhstan also will soon be a non-permanent member. So there is a possibility that if not now, later on, this proposal of Professor David Coppola might very well be a reality. I don't want to take up more of your time, but the international monetary system, which we all know is a global network of monetary mechanisms, has reached a state of the art in verification technology, and there are a number of countries, including my own, which are participating in this IMS, and although it's perhaps 90% complete, it is a very important infrastructure towards the implementation of the CTBT. So the systems are ready and in place. I think it's important to also note that Secretary of State Kerry, talking about the importance of the entry into force of the CTBT, had the directors of the 3 US nuclear weapons laboratories itself talk about the success in maintaining confidence in the stockpile. And so even the skeptics in Congress, in the Senate in particular, should be convinced that the CTBT will not be a major obstacle towards the credibility of their stockpile. There are, of course, continuing political problems which can only be resolved by the US presidential election and the elections to the Congress next year. But meanwhile, there are other ways and means by which the CTBT can be strengthened and reinforced as a legal norm. Thank you. I'll stop here.